Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the training field, sweat dripping from her forehead as she watched her fellow recruits complete the obstacle course with ease. At 22 years old, she had dreamed of joining the elite military unit since she was a child, watching action movies with her father. But 3 months into training, reality was crushing her dreams, one failed drill at a time. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Sergeant Williams called out the next exercise. Sarah's heart sank when she heard the familiar words. Combat simulation drill. Team Alpha versus Team Beta. She knew what was coming. Another opportunity to disappoint herself and her instructors. As the youngest of 4 sisters in a military family, Sarah had always felt the pressure to prove herself. Her father, a decorated Army veteran, had initially discouraged her from enlisting. The military isn't a place for dreamers, he had warned her. But Sarah was determined to show him wrong. She wanted to serve her country and make her family proud. The first drill began with a simulated enemy attack. Sarah's team had to navigate through a mock village while under fire from paintball guns. Within minutes, she found herself separated from her squad, hiding behind a concrete barrier while enemy fire pinned her down. Her radio crackled with urgent commands from her team leader. But panic had set in. She couldn't think clearly, couldn't move, couldn't even remember the basic tactics they had drilled hundreds of times. When the exercise ended, Sarah emerged covered in bright orange paint marks. She had been killed within the first 10 minutes. Again. Her teammates avoided eye contact as they walked past her toward the debriefing tent. She had let them down, and everyone knew it. During the debriefing, Sergeant Williams didn't even look in her direction. He focused on the successful strategies used by the other recruits while Sarah sat in the back row, fighting back tears of frustration. After 3 months of training, she was still making the same mistakes. Her shooting accuracy was poor, her tactical decisions were questionable, and her physical endurance lagged behind everyone else in her class. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her bunk, staring at a letter from home. Her sister Maria had written about her recent promotion at the law firm, while her sister Carmen had been accepted into medical school. Even her youngest sister Isabella was excelling in her engineering program. Sarah felt like the family failure, the one who couldn't measure up to the Martinez standard of excellence. She pulled out her phone and started typing a message to her commanding officer, requesting a meeting to discuss her future in the program. Maybe it was time to admit defeat. Maybe her father had been right all along. The military wasn't for dreamers, and she was definitely a dreamer who couldn't handle the harsh reality of combat training. As she lay in her narrow bunk that night, Sarah listened to the sounds of her fellow recruits sleeping peacefully around her. Tomorrow would bring another day of drills, another chance to fail, another reminder that she didn't belong in this elite unit. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine a different future, one where she wouldn't have to face the disappointed looks of her instructors or the whispered comments of her peers. Little did she know that everything was about to change. In just a few hours, a chance encounter with a visiting SEAL commander would alter the entire course of her military career and reveal strengths she never knew she possessed. The next morning arrived with the familiar sound of reveille echoing through the barracks. Sarah dragged herself out of bed, her body aching from the previous day's failed exercises. She had barely slept, spending most of the night replaying her mistakes and wondering if she should just quit before the instructors decided to kick her out. As she joined the formation for morning assembly, Sarah noticed an unfamiliar figure standing beside Sergeant Williams. The man was tall and lean, with weathered features that spoke of countless missions in dangerous places. His uniform bore the distinctive insignia of the Navy SEALs, and his presence commanded immediate respect from everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sergeant Williams announced, "this is Commander Jackson. He's here to observe our training program and evaluate potential candidates for advanced operations." The commander's steel-gray eyes swept across the group of recruits, briefly meeting Sarah's gaze before moving on. The morning began with the usual routine: physical training, weapons maintenance, and tactical briefings. Sarah tried to blend into the background, hoping to avoid any attention from the visiting commander. She had embarrassed herself enough in front of her regular instructors. She didn't need to add a Navy SEAL to her list of disappointed observers. During the afternoon combat drill, Sarah's worst fears came true. The exercise involved clearing a multi-story building of simulated terrorists while rescuing hostages. It was one of the most complex scenarios they had attempted, requiring split-second decision-making and flawless teamwork. Sarah's squad entered through the main entrance while another team flanked from the rear. Within minutes, everything went wrong. Sarah missed a crucial radio communication, moved to the wrong position, and accidentally exposed her teammate to enemy fire. The hostage she was supposed to protect was killed due to her tactical error. When the smoke cleared, Sarah found herself face-to-face with Commander Jackson. He had been observing the entire exercise from the command post, watching every mistake she made through the building's surveillance system. She braced herself for another lecture about her failures. Instead, Commander Jackson did something unexpected. He asked to speak with her privately after the debriefing. Sarah's stomach dropped. This was it. A Navy SEAL was about to tell her she wasn't cut out for military service. They walked to a quiet corner of the training facility, away from the other recruits. Commander Jackson studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Martinez, tell me something. When you were in that building today, what were you thinking about?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I was thinking about not making mistakes, sir. I was trying to remember all the procedures and follow the plan exactly as briefed." The commander nodded slowly. "That's your problem right there. You're fighting the training instead of trusting it. I've been watching you for 2 days, and I can see what your instructors can't. You have good instincts, but you're second-guessing yourself into failure." Sarah stared at him in confusion. Good instincts? She had just failed another drill spectacularly. How could he see anything positive in her performance? Commander Jackson continued, "I saw you hesitate before entering that room where the hostage was held. Your body language told me you sensed something was wrong, but instead of trusting that instinct, you talked yourself out of it and followed the plan. In real combat, that instinct might save your life and the lives of your teammates." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Tomorrow I want you to try something different. I want you to stop thinking so much and start feeling. Combat isn't just about following procedures. It's about adapting, improvising, and trusting your training to guide your instincts." As Commander Jackson walked away, Sarah felt a strange mixture of hope and confusion. For months, everyone had told her she was failing because she couldn't follow orders properly. Now a Navy SEAL was telling her the opposite. Maybe she wasn't as hopeless as she thought. Maybe there was something worth salvaging in her military career after all. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Commander Jackson's words echoed in her mind. Stop thinking so much and start feeling. She had spent months trying to be the perfect soldier, following every rule and procedure to the letter. But maybe that was exactly what was holding her back. She thought about her childhood, remembering how she used to play elaborate war games with her sisters in their backyard. Back then, she never hesitated or second-guessed herself. She moved on instinct, creating strategies on the fly and adapting to whatever challenges her sisters threw at her. When had she lost that natural confidence? The next morning brought a new challenge, an urban warfare simulation in a mock city built specifically for training purposes. The scenario involved multiple teams working together to neutralize threats while protecting civilian areas. Sarah's squad was assigned to secure the eastern sector, a maze of narrow alleys and multi-story buildings. As they approached their assigned area, Sarah felt the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. But this time, instead of letting it overwhelm her, she took a deep breath and tried to quiet her racing thoughts. She remembered Commander Jackson's advice: trust your training, trust your instincts. The exercise began with simulated explosions echoing through the mock city. Sarah's team moved cautiously through the streets, checking corners and clearing buildings methodically. Everything seemed routine until they reached an intersection where they were supposed to turn right toward their objective. Something felt wrong. Sarah couldn't explain it, but every fiber of her being was telling her not to take that right turn. The street looked clear, but her instincts were screaming danger. In the past, she would have ignored this feeling and followed the plan exactly as briefed. This time, she made a different choice. "Hold position," she whispered into her radio, signaling her teammates to stop. Something doesn't feel right about this approach. Her team leader, Corporal Davis, looked at her skeptically. The briefing clearly stated, "We take the right turn here, Martinez. We need to stick to the plan." Sarah studied the street again, trying to identify what was bothering her. The windows on the second floor of the corner building were too dark, and there were no birds or small animals in the area. In previous exercises, she had noticed that the training instructors always placed enemy snipers in positions with good sight lines and multiple escape routes. "Give me 30 seconds," she said, pulling out her binoculars. As she scanned the buildings more carefully, she spotted something that confirmed her suspicions. A small reflection of sunlight off what looked like a scope lens in one of the darkened windows. "Sniper, second floor, corner building," she reported quietly. "If we take that right turn as planned, we'll be walking directly into a kill zone." Instead of following the original route, Sarah suggested they approach from a different angle, using an alley that would provide cover and allow them to neutralize the sniper threat before proceeding to their objective. For the first time in months, her team actually listened to her tactical suggestion. The modified approach worked perfectly. They successfully eliminated the sniper threat and completed their mission with 0 casualties. As they emerged from the training area, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving at the base, a sense of accomplishment and belonging. Commander Jackson was waiting for them at the debrief point, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Nice work out there, Martinez. That was real tactical thinking, not just following orders. You potentially saved your entire squad from walking into an ambush." Sarah's teammates, who had largely ignored her for months, began looking at her with newfound respect. Corporal Davis clapped her on the shoulder and said, "Good call on that sniper. I owe you one." As they walked back toward the barracks, Sarah realized something fundamental had changed. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was thinking like a soldier. Commander Jackson had been right. Her instincts weren't a weakness to be suppressed, but a strength to be developed and trusted. For the first time since arriving at the training facility, Sarah allowed herself to hope that maybe she belonged here after all. Maybe she could become the soldier she had always dreamed of being. Word of Sarah's successful tactical decision spread quickly through the training camp. For the first time in months, other recruits began approaching her for advice and including her in their informal strategy discussions. The change was dramatic and almost overwhelming for someone who had grown accustomed to being overlooked and dismissed. Commander Jackson made a point of observing Sarah's performance in subsequent exercises. He didn't offer praise easily, but she could see approval in his eyes when she made smart tactical choices or adapted quickly to changing situations. More importantly, she was beginning to trust herself again. The real test came during a week-long field exercise designed to simulate actual combat conditions. The recruits were divided into 2 opposing forces and given a complex mission: infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected or captured. It was the most challenging scenario they had faced, and failure could mean recycling through months of additional training. Sarah's unit was assigned to play the role of infiltrators. They had to cross 15 miles of rough terrain, avoid enemy patrols, locate a hidden communications facility, photograph sensitive documents, and return to base within 72 hours. The opposing force, made up of the top-performing recruits in their class, would be actively hunting them. During the mission planning phase, Sarah noticed something that others had missed. The briefing materials showed several possible routes to the target, but they all followed predictable paths that any competent enemy would monitor closely. Sarah studied the topographical maps and identified an alternative approach that would be more difficult, but far less obvious. "What if we don't take any of these suggested routes?" she proposed during the team meeting. "There's a seasonal creek bed that runs roughly parallel to our target area. It's not on any of the standard maps, but I can see it in the satellite imagery. If we follow that creek bed, we can approach from the northwest instead of the expected southern routes." Her team leader, Lieutenant Morrison, was initially skeptical. That route would add at least 6 hours to our approach time, and we'd have to navigate through some pretty rough terrain. "Are you sure it's worth the risk?" Sarah explained her reasoning. "The extra time is worth it if it means we avoid detection. The opposing force is expecting us to take one of the obvious routes. They'll have their best people positioned along those approaches. The creek bed might be harder to navigate, but it gives us the element of surprise." After some debate, the team agreed to try Sarah's unconventional approach. What followed were some of the most challenging hours of their training. They moved through dense undergrowth, crossed rocky terrain in complete darkness, and navigated using only compass bearings and natural landmarks. During the second night, they encountered their first real test. Enemy patrols were sweeping the area much closer to their position than anyone had anticipated. Sarah's team found themselves trapped between 2 patrol units, with very limited options for concealment. As the sound of approaching footsteps grew closer, Sarah made another instinct-based decision. Instead of trying to hide and hope the patrols would pass by, she suggested they move toward the enemy. "If we stay here, they're going to find us eventually," she whispered. "But if we move between the patrol units while they're focused on searching the outer perimeter, we might be able to slip through undetected." It was a risky strategy that went against conventional wisdom, but Sarah's teammates had learned to trust her tactical instincts. They carefully maneuvered through the darkness, staying low and moving silently between the two enemy patrols. The plan worked perfectly. While the opposition was focused on searching obvious hiding spots, Sarah's team slipped past them and continued toward their objective. They reached the communications facility ahead of schedule and successfully completed their intelligence-gathering mission. The photographs they obtained were clear and comprehensive, and they managed to plant tracking devices on enemy equipment without being detected. The extraction phase proved equally challenging, but Sarah's unconventional thinking continued to serve them well. When they discovered that the enemy had set up roadblocks along all the obvious escape routes, she suggested they travel during daylight hours rather than at night. "They're expecting us to move under cover of darkness," she explained. "If we move during the day and use proper camouflage techniques, we might be able to avoid their night vision equipment and thermal imaging." Once again, her counterintuitive approach proved successful. They returned to base 12 hours ahead of schedule, having completed their mission without a single team member being captured or compromised. Commander Jackson was waiting for them at the debrief station, his expression unreadable as always. But when he spoke, there was unmistakable respect in his voice. "Outstanding work, Martinez. Your tactical innovations turned what should have been a difficult mission into a textbook example of adaptive thinking and strategic planning." The success of the field exercise marked a turning point in Sarah's military training. Her confidence grew with each passing day, and her performance in combat drills improved dramatically. She was no longer the recruit who failed every exercise, but someone her peers looked to for tactical guidance and innovative solutions to complex problems. Commander Jackson extended his stay at the training facility specifically to work with Sarah and a few other promising recruits. During private training sessions, he shared advanced techniques and strategies that weren't part of the standard curriculum. These sessions pushed Sarah to her limits, but she thrived under the challenging instruction. "The military needs soldiers who can think independently," Commander Jackson explained during one of their training sessions. "Anyone can follow orders, but it takes a special kind of person to make the right decision when there's no playbook to follow. That's what separates good soldiers from great ones." Sarah's transformation didn't go unnoticed by the training staff. Sergeant Williams, who had barely acknowledged her existence for months, began using her tactical decisions as examples during briefings. Other instructors started asking for her input when developing new training scenarios. The recognition felt surreal after months of feeling like she didn't belong. But the real validation came when Commander Jackson approached her with an unexpected opportunity. "I'm putting together a recommendation for you to attend advanced combat training," he said. "It's a specialized program that only accepts the top 5% of military personnel. The training is intense and the failure rate is high, but I think you're ready for it." Sarah was stunned. Advanced combat training was something she had never even considered pursuing. It was reserved for elite soldiers who demonstrated exceptional skills and leadership potential. Just months earlier, she had been on the verge of quitting the military entirely. "Are you sure, sir?" she asked. "My record for the first 3 months was pretty terrible. I don't want to waste anyone's time if I'm not qualified." Commander Jackson smiled, something she had rarely seen from him. "Martinez, those first 3 months don't define you. They were just the price you paid for learning who you really are as a soldier. The question is, are you ready to find out how good you can actually become?" The decision wasn't easy. Advanced combat training would mean leaving behind the friends she had finally made and starting over in an even more challenging environment. It would also mean months away from her family, who were just beginning to understand and support her military career. Sarah called home that evening to discuss the opportunity with her parents. Her father's reaction surprised her. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "When you first told me you wanted to join the military, I was worried you wouldn't be able to handle the challenges. But you've proven me wrong. If Commander Jackson thinks you're ready for advanced training, then I trust his judgment. Her mother was more emotional about the decision. "I just want you to be safe and happy," she said through tears. "But I can hear the confidence in your voice now. You sound like a completely different person than you were 6 months ago." Her sisters were unanimously supportive. Maria, the lawyer, joked that Sarah was finally living up to the Martinez family tradition of overachieving. Carmen, the medical student, said she was excited to have a sister in special operations. Even Isabella, usually too focused on her engineering studies to pay attention to family drama, called specifically to congratulate Sarah on her opportunity. The final weeks of basic training passed quickly. Sarah continued to excel in combat exercises, often taking unofficial leadership roles when her natural tactical abilities made her the obvious choice for coordinating team strategies. Her transformation from struggling recruit to respected leader was complete. On graduation day, Sarah stood among the top performers in her class as families gathered to celebrate their achievements. Her parents had flown in from across the country to attend the ceremony, and she could see the pride in their eyes as she received several awards for tactical excellence and leadership. Commander Jackson delivered the keynote address, speaking about the importance of perseverance and the value of soldiers who could adapt and overcome challenges. As he spoke, his eyes met Sarah's, and she knew that his words were directed at least partially toward her journey. After the ceremony, families mingled with their newly graduated soldiers. Sarah's father approached Commander Jackson to thank him personally for his mentorship. "I don't know what you said to my daughter," he told the SEAL commander, "but you helped her find something in herself that she didn't know existed." Commander Jackson shook hands with Sarah's parents before turning to address her directly. "Advanced combat training starts in 2 weeks. Are you ready for the next challenge?" Sarah straightened her shoulders and met his gaze confidently. "Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever comes next." 2 years later, Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez stood in the briefing room of a classified military facility, addressing a group of new recruits who reminded her of herself not so long ago. She had successfully completed advanced combat training, served on 3 overseas deployments, and earned recognition as one of the military's rising tactical specialists. The recruits before her showed the same mixture of determination and uncertainty that she remembered from her own early days. Some appeared confident and eager, while others seemed overwhelmed by the challenges ahead. Sarah could easily identify which ones were struggling with self-doubt because she recognized the look in their eyes. "I want to tell you about failure," she began, her voice carrying the authority that came from hard-earned experience. 6 years ago, I stood exactly where you're standing now. I failed my first combat drill, my second combat drill, and pretty much every combat drill for 3 months straight. My instructors thought I was hopeless, my fellow recruits avoided me, and I was ready to quit." She paused, letting the words sink in. Several recruits exchanged glances, and she could see recognition in the faces of those who were currently struggling with their own training challenges. But failure taught me something that success never could have. It taught me that the difference between a good soldier and a great one isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from those mistakes and discovering strengths you didn't know you had. Sarah went on to share the story of Commander Jackson's intervention and how his simple advice to trust her instincts had changed everything. She talked about the importance of adaptive thinking, the value of unconventional approaches, and the need for soldiers who could make decisions under pressure. "The military will teach you procedures and tactics," she explained, "but it can't teach you to trust yourself. That's something you have to learn on your own. Some of you will learn it quickly, others will struggle like I did. But everyone in this room has the potential to become an exceptional soldier if you're willing to push through the difficult moments." After the briefing, several recruits approached her with questions. One young man, who introduced himself as Private Johnson, looked particularly discouraged. "Ma'am, I've been failing my marksmanship test consistently. I'm starting to think maybe I'm not cut out for this." Sarah smiled, remembering her own struggles with shooting accuracy. "Tell me something, Johnson. What are you thinking about when you're on the firing range?" "I'm thinking about not missing the target, about keeping my hands steady, about not disappointing my instructors," he replied. "That's your problem right there," Sarah said, echoing Commander Jackson's words from years earlier. "You're thinking too much. Tomorrow I want you to try something different. Stop worrying about failure and start focusing on the fundamentals. Trust your training and let your muscle memory take over." A few months later, Sarah received a message from Private Johnson. He had not only passed his marksmanship tests, but had scored among the top performers in his class. The message was brief but meaningful. Thank you for helping me stop thinking so much and start trusting myself. Sarah had found her calling not just as a soldier, but as a mentor to others who were struggling to find their place in the military. She had been promoted to lead a specialized training program that focused on developing adaptive tactical thinking in soldiers who showed potential but were having difficulty with conventional approaches. Commander Jackson, now a full colonel, visited her facility regularly to observe the innovative training methods she had developed. During one of his visits, he pulled her aside for a private conversation. "I've been following your career progress," he said. "The recruits you've trained are performing exceptionally well in the field. You've developed something special here." Sarah felt the same sense of accomplishment she had experienced during that first successful combat exercise years earlier. "I learned from the best, sir. I'm just paying it forward." Colonel Jackson nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what the military needs more of. Soldiers who understand that our greatest strength isn't in following orders blindly, but in developing people who can think critically and adapt to any situation." That evening, Sarah called her parents to share the news of her latest promotion and the expansion of her training program. Her father, who had once worried about her ability to succeed in the military, now bragged about her accomplishments to anyone who would listen. "I always knew you had it in you," he said, though they both remembered his initial skepticism. "You just needed to find the right path to bring out your strengths." Her mother was equally proud but focused on the personal growth she had witnessed. "You've become such a confident leader. It's amazing to see how much you've changed since those early days when you were so unsure of yourself." As Sarah ended the call, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From failing recruit to respected instructor, from someone who couldn't follow orders, to someone who taught others to think independently. Her transformation had been complete. She thought about Commander Jackson's simple order that had changed everything. Trust your instincts. That single piece of advice had unlocked potential she never knew she possessed, and had led to a career that exceeded her wildest dreams. Now, as she prepared for another day of training, soldiers who reminded her of her younger self, Sarah understood that her greatest victory wasn't overcoming her own failures, but helping others discover that failure could be the first step toward extraordinary success.